All right, welcome to the training tonight, everybody. As you can see here on the screen, we are talking about something called eBay selling limits, which is something that impacts all eBay sellers, new sellers, and old sellers alike. Although I will say that this is more of a concern for you guys that are a little bit newer, and we're going to explain that here in just a second. As a general rule, before I get into the nuts and bolts of talking about selling limits, I want to make this point right here because this is a point we drive home all the time. Um, with our strategy, especially with a drop shipping strategy, a good eBay drop ship strategy equals lots of listings. Okay, sometimes we call this volume listing. Okay. So what do I mean by that? I mean, for most of you guys that are going to be making decent money on eBay, using drop shipping, you cannot do it with a small handful of items. In most cases, we recommend you have hundreds of listings. So, if that's the case, and I truly believe that as I've reviewed my clients over the years, my very best ones, in fact, my very best one has over 1,000 listings. And that may seem like a very difficult task to manage. It's really not. However, that's a discussion for another time. The point I want to make is that our strategy using drop shipping revolves around listing and volume and having a lot of stuff up there. Okay. If that's the case, then this issue right here is just that. It's an issue. So what is a selling limit? Well, all of you have them, whether you know it or not, all of you have them. It simply means this. It's an account selling limit, okay? So what that means is your eBay account has some kind of restriction on two things. And I'm just going to take notes here so you guys can follow along. So it's a restriction on two things. One, the dollar amount or like the value of your merchandise. Okay. And then two, the number of items, products listed. Okay. Everybody has those two restrictions. This is called an account selling limit. Okay. So that means, as an example, a lot of you guys, when you first get started, have a selling limit of somewhere around $5,000 worth of merchandise and 100 items. That means on your account at any one given time, you cannot have more than 100 active items listed, and the aggregate value of those 100 items cannot exceed $5,000 worth of merchandise. So, let's say I have two listings, okay? Both are worth $2,500. Could I list a third listing given my account restriction here? I could not, right? Because in my two listings, and these would obviously be expensive items, right? Say there are a couple of pieces of very expensive furniture. I've exceeded or at least just gotten up to my $5,000, haven't I? Could I list a third item even if it was only worth $2? I could not. Okay. On the reverse side, let's say I have 100 listings and I'm only selling my stuff for $5 a piece. Okay. Maybe I'm selling like baseball cards, trading cards of some sort. Well, that's only $500 worth of merchandise, but could I list 101st and my 101st item? I couldn't, right? Because I would be exceeding this limit right here. Now, if in a month, so your limits often will reset during the month. If during the month you have 100 items and $5,000 worth of merchandise and you sell one of those items, then for the rest of the month you can only have 99 items listed. You can't have 100. You can only have 99 because that one sale counts towards your limit. Okay, it's just a small little nuance there if you're wondering. So that's what limits are all about. That's what they are. Now, how do you know? And this is the big question I get. Well, okay, that makes sense, Trevor, but how do I know what my limits are on my eBay account? Well, if you're a newer seller, okay, you signed up for eBay last week, you got your PayPal account set up and you're just starting, there's probably not an area on eBay that will show you your limits. You can't like log into your eBay account and find your limits because in most cases eBay doesn't post them. After you've sold for a little while and eBay's given you a limit, a lot of times you'll see it posted there on your account under your like your all selling section. On eBay, you can go to like your active selling area and it shows all your listings that you're currently selling. Usually your limits will appear there. But I get newer clients all the time that are like, hey, I can't find my limits on my account. And that's because they're probably just not posted. That doesn't mean you have no limit. You most certainly do have a limit. It's just not posted. Okay. If you'd like to find out what your limit is, list and list and list and list until you hit your limit, whatever it is. Some of you will have a limit when you first get started, so this is not totally uncommon, of $500 or 10 items. And some of you who have gotten that limit, and that does happen a lot. So if that was you and you got that limit at the start, don't be dismayed because a lot of my best clients started out that way. But initially you wouldn't even know that, right? You have no idea what your limit is, right? You're just a new seller. So my recommendation to you is list as if you don't have a limit. Okay? Don't go crazy with crazy expensive stuff right off the bat. I mean, I always tell my clients, maybe 100, 125 bucks max per item. No lower than maybe $50 an item to get started. And you'll list, and then guess what'll happen when you go to list that maybe 11th item? Maybe your limit is higher than that. Maybe it's your 51st item or your 101st item. All of a sudden you get this notice that's like, hey, you hit your limit. It's not a bad thing. eBay's just saying, hey, you hit your limit. So you get this notice that pops up, and then it'll give you an option. It'll be like, hey, do you want to increase your limits? And you just click this little button, boom, right there on eBay, and eBay may consider immediately pushing up your limits. But a lot of times on newer accounts, you want to know what happens. It says, hey, we can't increase your limits without talking to you about it first. So let's talk about it, and they'll have you call in and talk to somebody. So that phone call, I mean, for most of you guys, you'll have that. And here's what happens: you get on the call, and some eBay representative will talk to you for a minute and be like, "Hey," so they'll get to know you a little bit. They'll look up your account. They'll see how long your account has been in existence. They'll see how many sales you have. They'll look at your listings. They may even ask you. They may say, "Hey, what are you selling, and where are you getting your merchandise?" Here's my big recommendation up front. Not that we've got anything to hide, but I think eBay probably gets a little nervous about brand new sellers that are doing some drop shipping strategy. They probably don't realize you're in an advanced coaching training program. And so if you're like, hey, yeah, I'm drop shipping and I've got all these suppliers and I'm using Walmart and I'm using XYZ supplier that I'm getting at wholesale. And anyway, they may be like, whoa, that seems a little shady. You're brand new. How are you doing all of this? Right? So, you know what? I'm kind of vague. I tell my clients to be a little vague. When they get you on the phone, be like, well, I'm if they do ask you about it, I say, hey, I'm just starting. Yes, you can see my account is new, but I'm actually in an eBay training program. You can tell them that you're in a training program. Sometimes that helps. I don't know if giving them our coaching company's name is going to help. You got to remember, you're just talking to like a basic customer service person. So I don't know, it may help. And if they're like, hey, where are you getting your stuff? You can be like, hey, we're getting it from retailers. And I know some of you guys do some stuff from around the house. You can say, hey, I've got some stuff from around my house. They may notice that you're using stock photos. And so you can tell them, yeah, I've actually got some suppliers I'm getting some of this stuff from. Just, be forthright and honest with them. But try not to sound like you don't totally know what you're doing, because then they're not going to want to increase your limits. You got to remember, guys, eBay has some risk here, right? They're giving you the privilege of selling on their platform. They don't want to give you some giant limit if you don't know what you're doing. So sound confident on the phone. You do know what you're doing, kind of, right? You know what you're doing because we're teaching you how to do it, but sound confident on the phone. That'll help you out. So anyway, that's sort of how you increase your limits. You're going to want to call them about it. Now, if in fact, okay, so let's pretend for a minute you make that phone call and they say, you know what? Sorry, right? They say, sorry, we're not going to increase your limits. And here's why. A lot of times they'll say, your account isn't old enough. They'll say, you don't have any selling history, no feedback. We want to watch you, they'll say. Sometimes they say 90 days. Sometimes they say 30 days. We want to watch you. Okay. If you get some of that from the person, don't give them a hard time about it. Thank them for their time. A lot of times, say, what day can I call back in and talk to you guys about the limits? They may give you a day. All right. Mark that in your calendar. Most of you guys, it's like your first 30 days. And trust me, if you've got small limits during your first 30 days, we do other things in this program besides eBay, right? eBay is just one of the cogs in this machine of making money. If you get stuck on limits, we'll move on to other strategies while we wait for our limits to increase. So don't let that deflate you too much. Nonetheless, we want high limits as soon as we can get them. So the big question is, if that's the response you get from eBay, what do I do now? That's the question I get from my clients. What do I do now? How do I get eBay to increase my limits sooner? Okay. Well, here's some advice that I have for you. Number one, make your eBay account a business account. Okay. What do I mean by that? Well, there's different types of eBay accounts. There's personal accounts and then there's business accounts. It's a simple upgrade on your account. We have a training on it. I won't go into too much detail right now, but make your account a business account. That should help the likelihood of getting an increased limit. Okay. Number two, max out your listings, which means if you're given a limit of 100 items and $5,000 worth of merchandise and you're not maxing that out, meaning you're not using the entire limit, don't expect an increase, right? Use your existing limit, then contact eBay and look to get it increased. Sometimes it's funny. I'll get a few clients that'll call prematurely or whatever, and eBay's like, well, wait a minute. Wait, what? Why are we going to increase your account? You haven't even used your whole limit, so use it first, okay? Max it out. Number three, call multiple times. Maybe wait it out by a couple of days. What's interesting is, just like any company, eBay has different people in their customer service division, and sometimes I think they almost give them the autonomy just to decide who they want to give higher limits to. I'm sure there's some guidelines in that limits department or whatever they call it there at eBay. But sometimes if you talk to somebody who's in a good mood on the right day, they'll increase your limits. So if one person tells you no, call again, try another person, and then call again and try another person another day, probably 3 times. And if still the answer is no, then we'll move on. So I'm going to say, if no still, then do this. Okay. Then here are other options. You will increase the likelihood of getting higher limits if you do these things. Okay. 1, do you have an older account? Okay. Newer accounts struggle a little bit because they are new. That's why sometimes you'll hear me say, and I'll ask some of you guys when we first meet, hey, do you have an existing eBay account? If you do, let's use that. because you're entitled to some inherent benefits that come with having an older account. Sometimes those inherent benefits that I'm talking about are higher limits. So maybe use your older account as your business account, and then maybe you register a second account for like your own personal buying and stuff. So some of you guys are eBay shoppers and you don't like to shop on your business account, so you set up 2 separate accounts. If you're not like a big eBay shopper, then maybe just keep it all on one account. I actually keep most of my stuff on one account, although I do have multiple. So use an older account if you have it. Number 2, make sales. You know, eBay makes 10% off of your sales, right? Sell something for $100, eBay's bringing home $10. They want you to make sales. That is how they're in business. If you can make a few sales on your account, you better believe they're going to want you to make more sales, so they're more apt to increase your limits. Okay, so make sales. Get positive feedback. Okay, meaning get your customers to actually leave you positive remarks if you can. There's some things you can do to increase that, but overall, get positive feedback. Low cancellations, low out of stocks, right? That kind of thing. No cases that are open. So stay away from the negative stuff, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, and then make sure, like, call if you're told no several times, then wait 30 days and call again and see if they'll increase it. You don't necessarily have to make sales on your account to get higher limits. A lot of my clients will just have maxed out limits, and then they call and they get higher limits just as long as they've waited 30 days from when they put their first listing up. Okay, so I guess I'll just say, wait your time. Do your time, right? Okay, let's say none of that's working and you're just so anxious and it's driving you crazy, and eBay's, it's the main thing you're going to do, and you're not interested in doing some of the other strategies we have and link posting and doing your own website and so on and so forth. And you're so frustrated that you're stuck. You can set up another eBay account. So let's say one account has $5,000, right? Like we were talking about earlier, $5,000 and 100 items. Okay. Go set up a second account and get the same limit as well. So now you're at, $10,000 and 200 items. You can do that. Now eBay's got some policies on multiple accounts. Okay, and let me show you what I'm talking about here. Here is a page that talks about eBay's policy on having multiple accounts. Technically, they don't like you to create a second account just because you're trying to circumvent their limits policy. Okay, and I won't read all of this to you there, but this is essentially what that says. They say you're more than welcome to have multiple accounts. In fact, they say here there are many reasons why users would choose to have more than one eBay account. For example, users may like to buy and sell on separate accounts. Other users who maintain businesses on eBay may prefer to manage separate accounts for different product lines. And we can make that argument that, hey, on this account, we're going to focus on these couple of suppliers and product lines, and on this other account, we're going to focus on these other ones. And you can get away with setting up multiple accounts. We have had clients, to circumvent the limits, they've set up an account in their spouse's name. They've set up an account in their kids' names, right? You can have multiple accounts if you need to that you can sell off of. But use that as a last resort. Our preference is that you have one account that you use. But if you're absolutely dying to have more listings and access to more items you can sell, you can set up more than one account. Okay. Let me see, before I get to comments, let me see if there's anything I missed. Oh, yes. Okay, so our discussion tonight has been about general account limits, okay? But given there's actually a couple of other types of accounts. Okay, so let me just make a note of this here. Actually, let me zoom in. It might be easier, and I'll just highlight them here. Okay, we've been talking about this account limits. Let me talk about category limits. There's certain categories within eBay that are high fraud categories, meaning let's take like handbags for example. There's a lot of fake handbags out there, right? You ever gone to New York City or somewhere in Asia, Hong Kong? These places that manufacture these fake Coach, quote unquote Coach, or Gucci or Michael Kors or whatever. They make them look like they're legit designer bags, but they're not, right? And eBay is so worried about you selling illegitimate merchandise that on what they consider their more high fraud categories, they'll let you maybe sell a couple of those handbags, but then they won't let you do more than a couple because they want to watch to make sure the feedback is good and that there's no chargebacks or issues with the customer wanting a refund because it's fake. If you can show a track record of selling legit merchandise in some of those high fraud categories, then they'll release your category limit. Got a client once that sold a crazy number of jeans, and they were buying these jeans from places locally, secondhand shops, discount racks, and they were so frustrated because when they first started selling these jeans, they couldn't sell all of their inventory because eBay was like, "No, we're gonna wait and make sure you're selling legit merchandise," and so they had to wait it out for it seemed like a couple of months, and then after they established a pretty good track record, they were allowed to sell more of those items. So those are called category limits. You may run into that on occasion. Item limits is sort of related to that. So we're not going to go into too much detail on that other than you're only allowed to sell certain items and a certain number of those. Same thing. So bottom line is the important part of this is your overall account limit. And hopefully tonight we've addressed why that exists and sort of like how to fix that, how to get around it, and how to increase the likelihood that you'll have a much larger limit. Because as we established in the first 2 minutes of our training tonight, if I can revert back to our notes, good eBay dropship strategy equals lots of listings, right? Isn't that what we said? And you can't get lots of listings if you're stuck with limits. Okay, so let me just look through some of your comments. Jeff says, where can we go to find the restrictions on our accounts? Um, if you don't have a restriction, well, usually I don't think it explicitly says like which categories and which places you have limits on your account. I could be wrong about that, but that's usually a conversation I have with somebody over there at eBay. Um, yeah, I would love to share my eBay account, Kathy, but I don't. I used to actually used to share and show some of the stuff that I've got going on eBay, and then I all of a sudden had lots of copycats get into the market on stuff that I had been selling. Sometimes selling the exact same kind of stuff, which was a little aggravating. So as a matter of policy for the health of my own business, yeah, I usually just don't show it. Hopefully you guys can understand why that is. I don't have currently a recorded webinar on that, Henry, but we can have a training session on it for sure. I get that question a lot about how do I manage an account with with large limits, and you know the answer is it's fairly easy to do, but there's some little tips and tricks. Maybe we can do a training on that on another day. Hopefully this was straightforward tonight. We handle these discussions with our clients all the time. This I hope is clear. Good luck to you guys increasing your limits. I'll tell you what, I haven't thought about my own account limits in years because once you get in the habit of selling, eBay keeps up with you. Like you're not always going to have to call and say, "Hey, increase my limits, increase my." They'll just do it naturally. And I've got clients right now that have limits that are over $1 million. So they can sell over $1 million worth of merchandise and somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 or 5,000 items. I mean, it's insane. So it really only bothers you over the first couple of months, and that's why this is a bit more directed to you guys that are brand new. Anyway, thank you for being here. I hope that was helpful. We will see you all next week. Thanks again.